One thing that I think many of us could get behind is a good redemption story. I think just on a very basic level, it's a very human thing to get behind, like for somebody, or a company, or even a game that is being knocked down. And then they're in a position to actually better that game. I do not mean where some minor improvements are made here and there, but almost like the game receives a full-on 2.0 kind of revamp. Maybe the story stays the same, but tweaks, changes, and improvements and options are then implemented to create a better player experience. I think we can generally get behind something like this, even after a horrible launch, frustrating issues, and anything like that. We even see that with the most vocal of us, where some launches are bad or in a lackluster state, and it ends up getting fixed and stays fixed. That is something to celebrate, but it is a tricky situation because there always is that argument that whatever the game was when it initially released, it should have ideally released in a better manner. So when I see what is currently being done to Star Wars Outlaws, it makes me wonder and want to bring it up here. If things are fixed and bettered, are you willing to come back? What would cause you to come back or even buy into that experience? Would you support a redemption story for this particular game? So let's look at where Star Wars Outlaws sort of currently stands right now. If we just look at the user reviews on Steam, the game has a mostly positive rating with over 1,000 reviews. So that's a rather small population of people diving into that game for Steam, and that amount of people thinks it's pretty good. That also tells me too that if the player count was larger, this would then have more reviews, and I wonder if the game would have a stronger or weaker rating here on Steam. What I mean is, would the game lean more towards being a strong positive, or being more of a mixed game? So either way, that is where we are with the game in terms of how user reviews are on Steam. It gives us something to work off of. So within the last month, Ubisoft has come out and said that they are committed to trying to fix and bettering their game. For example, improving areas of the game that players were very vocal about, like improving the stealth and other elements within this title. I give them credit for getting in front of all of this, and at least addressing that this game is not doing well. They could be like BioWare, where they keep having the big media trying to gaslight all of us into thinking that Veilguard is actually a good game, and where the BioWare developers are not even acknowledging their shortcomings at all. Both games are not in the ideal position to be in, but one is actively trying to make up for their mistakes, and this is something that I think could look more favorably on the game as a whole, with how they're honestly willing to talk about their shortcomings, and the other one, not so much. So this could be the beginning of Outlaw's redemption story, and I want to clarify too, that while it is good that Ubisoft wants to better the game and improve it, those are great things to say, but the big question will be if Ubisoft can actually pull that off. If they can, we'll be in an interesting situation. Will that be enough for players to get behind them and support those efforts to better the game? Because I will flip this around too. The game should have been better at launch, at least according to a large amount of players who chose to dove into it. Plus you have a huge property like Star Wars. This game should have been a hit to begin with, even if the game wasn't really that good. One would think that as an outsider, you have a big IP, and then a game based on that would probably be big as well. But this also might be a reason what hurt the sales too for this Outlaws game, is that Star Wars does not really have the same appeal that it used to, because it was damaged so much by what Disney has done to it for so many years now. Either way, Ubisoft has a rather uphill battle ahead of them if they really want to make this all right. I want to provide an example where I played a Ubisoft game that came out in a less than favorable state, and then was able to better it later on. So I was a huge fan of the Ghost Recon Wildlands game. There you had an excellent open world. It was huge, so many varied locations, along with a large amount of ways to complete and take over a base, or even tackle situations. Sure, the missions themselves were more of the restrictive action, but the open world action was a true highlight, and offered a lot, and I mean a lot of variety on top of that. I really loved it. So when Ghost Recon Breakpoint was announced, I was interested in that it was going to follow that Wildlands route. When it came out and launched, it was a big disappointment. There were changes to the weapon system, like it being more of a looter shooter, along with survival elements that personally felt like it really just didn't belong in this experience. It honestly felt like a game that should have come out before Wildlands, and that Wildlands, being the older game, actually felt like the better of the two. So I opted to then skip out on it and not play Breakpoint because of the direction that it it was taking. Then I believe it was about at least a year after the game came out, or maybe a bit longer, Ubisoft managed to issue out a revamp of the game. And honestly, I was hugely impressed with what they were able to do for that particular title. They included options to really curate a player's experience, to really let them play the game how they wanted to. For example, if you wanted to have some of those survival elements in your experience, you could do that and then tweak how they're going to work. Or you could even opt to not even have them in your game. Like, you could even completely remove gameplay mechanics from that title. The same went with how the loot system worked. You could make the weapon system work like it did in Wildlands, or more of a looter shooter. Even better yet, you could play a co-op game with somebody who has the Wildlands loot system, and then someone who has the looter shooter system that it launched with, and it all worked together. I look at this as a really good example where Breakpoint launched in a very bad state, and was kind of impressed with what Ubisoft was able to do with it. Yes, the game should have launched better, but if it didn't fail, I don't think we would have seen all those options that ended up in Breakpoint. So in that sense, I think the failure and opportunity to improve ended up creating a better game in the long run. This is a very tricky situation because I am not downplaying the launch at all. Like, I didn't even really want to play this game. So it was bad, but they managed to improve the game substantially. So it's a weird place where you need to acknowledge the failure that it was at the start, and at the same time acknowledge and recognize their ability to improve the game. And it isn't even the only situation where we've seen this happen with Ubisoft, or even in this industry as a whole. So when I look at other redemption stories, like say take the really good ones like Cyberpunk, it had a less than stellar launch, lots of issues, and kind of deceptive with how the PS4 version ran on the PS4. I played the PS4 version on the PS5, and honestly with the large amount of issues and crashes, I still loved that game. But even so, the game did manage to improve over time. No Man's Sky also launched very badly, and then has more than made up for its mistakes at launch, with so much free add-on content and improvements. Generally, the reception behind both of those titles is rather positive. It would seem like they've more than earned that redemption. So I want to direct this back to Star Wars Outlaws. Can this game manage to do this as well? Do they have the potential to pull off a redemption like that? What would they need to do something like that? I know it's a different Ubisoft team that made Breakpoint than the ones that made Outlaws, but Breakpoint was still able to pull off that redemption. And I want to clarify too, I haven't even played Star Wars Outlaws yet. Yes, there's so many games and I try to cover many of them on the channel, and I just had not had the opportunity to try it. Plus, with some of the previews I watched, I really hated what they did with the main character's face model. It looked like they took an attractive actress and then uglied her up on purpose for the game. It made no sense. Also, a lot of the dialogue was very bad, and it just didn't sound like something that belonged in Star Wars, or at least Lucas's Star Wars. So I'm like, I have plenty to play now, I'm gonna skip this one. But there is still a part of me that wants this game to be good. Of course I want better Star Wars games, and good ones, and I have a soft spot for the developer. I love Massive Entertainment, especially for their work on Division 1. It's easily one of my favorite third-person shooters. But one, Massive Entertainment is, well, a massive company, and I'm not sure who of their talent worked on Outlaws, and with all the turnover, much of that Division 1 team might even not still be there. So I'm left in this difficult position of not knowing if they can pull this off this time around, and really earn that redemption. Maybe they can. I want them to. I would prefer it. So that is where I'm going to leave it, and more importantly, pass it all off to you. What do you think about all of this? Does Outlaws deserve a second chance down the road? What does the game need to do and improve on to really push you to buy it and play it? Let me know all of this in the comments down below. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you can help to keep this channel going strong, and this allows me to be able to do more for my awesome audience. Please check out the links in the description and pinned comment for ways to support the channel. And most of all, thank you very much for watching.